me begin by sharing the screen with you and see if somebody would read this reflection for us. We have a volunteer to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. Here it is.
When the evangelists compiled their gospels, they were living after the climax of God's saving act in Jesus Christ. The gospels were written in the light of the church's knowledge that Jesus had risen and that he was relating to his followers in a new way. This is a presupposition of the New Testament understanding of God, and it explains why a new view of the people of God developed. There is a parallel to the Exodus story, which gave new meaning to the events that had happened to God's people before that time. The Emmaus Road passage, Luke 24:13-35, provides a narrative view of a transformation that was taking place among Jesus' followers. Cleopas and his friend were in a dilemma. They were not ready to accept the reports about Jesus' resurrection, yet they could not give up their hope that he might bring a new day to God's oppressed people. Their discussion with the unrecognized traveler turns on continuity between the old revelation and the new time. They recognize Jesus during a mealtime, which directly connects them with experiences from his earlier ministry. This breakthrough disclosure of the resurrection immediately leads the two to join the community that is sharing support and witness.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. One of the things I liked about that was the idea that these gospels were written after the fact, and I think one of the things that we'll dig into, of course, are the differences between the stories and how they're told, but the fact that they're written from a perspective of faith already, I think that kind of informs us, and maybe we've been talking about some of these things already in looking at the different stories, like looking at the different stories of the birth of Jesus and so on. But let's begin with a word of prayer, and I'll offer this from the guide. Living God, we are awestruck before the wonder of Jesus' resurrection. Your breathtaking power in bringing life from death quickens our pulses and engages our imaginations. In trust, we set our hearts upon your promises. A resurrection hope strengthens us in enduring all that lies ahead. Speak your word to us in this story so that we may anticipate with hope your ultimate surprise. Guide our questions so that your answers will touch our hearts and not just our minds. Through our risen Lord, we pray. Amen. All right, some really good stuff for tonight. There's one thing I noticed before we dig in here. In preparing the search, the definitions here they have for Mary, the mother of James, one of the 6 Marys mentioned in the New Testament. There's a typo here. It says she may be the same as, quote, the other Mary, and, quote, Mary, the wife of, that should be Clopas, not Cleopas. Clopas, so you can cross out that E. Cleopas being the one that's mentioned only one time, right, in the story we're looking at tonight in the walk to Emmaus. And so anyway, I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, that's not right, and it's not right. So
there shouldn't be an E there, is that
right? Yeah. So Clopas is somebody that I think also was mentioned once, so we're not really sure who that is. And I suppose it's possible it could have been a typo or something, and it is the same person, but I don't know, it's probably not super important for us. But anyway, I noticed that and wanted to correct that. One of the things I'd like for us to do as we look through these stories and we share our reflections is have you think about that question, who is it that you see, and what does what does a resurrected Jesus mean to you? So how is the good news proclaimed in each of the stories is the question, and one way to think about it then, how would you express the good news? We'll see if we can get to that, but I'd like for that at least to be kind of floating around in your head a little bit, and we'll get to that later on. For at least the resurrection stories, the first, maybe even the first 5 stories or so on here that we're looking at, or passages, I'd like to have somebody read that, the whole thing, and have us listen, and then we'll talk about what we observed in the in our notes and things like that. Remember our questions, by the way. How did the disciples experience the events of Easter Sunday? What convinced the followers of Jesus that he was alive? I think it's a really good question. What convinced them that he was alive? And how is the good news proclaimed in each of the stories? Okay. So is there somebody who would read for us the resurrection account in Matthew 28, 1 through 10?
I can do that. I got it.
Thanks.
After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me."
Okay. Thanks. All right. Anybody want to start in with their notes? What is it that you heard in this, or saw in this, rather, I should say? What do you have in your notes?
I think it's always interesting that it's women that are involved here.
Yeah, I really want to talk about that. Maybe a little bit later on, but let's remember that one, Tom. I want to come back and talk about that. Yeah, all the stories. It's the women that at least at first are the ones that go to the tomb. How about the
But
earthquake?
you don't want to talk about that now.
What's that?
You don't want to talk about that.
No, I want to make sure that we get through the passages and everything. We can come back and take a look at it. I do want to talk about that for sure. But there are some things that stand out in Matthew's story that are unique to his. The great earthquake, right? That happens here.
That explains how the stone got rolled away. Was the earthquake somehow was a part of that? Maybe the angel rolls it away, but I had taken that as a partial explanation of the stone being rolled away.
Oh, yeah. Well, it says the angel rolled it away, but maybe the earthquake loosened it up a little bit, and it's kind of like getting the bottle of ketchup open. But Yeah, and then the angel, I mean, the description of the angel is bright as lightning, in the NRSV at least. And what about the presence of the guards? You have to go back and look at the backstory there, to understand what was happening there. Who were these guards that were there?
Well, they may not have been totally with it.
Weren't they the guards of the what is it, Sanhedrin or whatever? The synagogue guard?
Yeah, yes, yeah, the Pharisees and chief priests, yeah.
Hired by them.
Yeah, so they went to Pilate, and they said, hey, we're afraid, basically. They were afraid that the Jesus disciples were going to steal the body, so they could proclaim that he had been resurrected. And Pilate says, well, you have some guards, why don't you go ahead and go over there, and he kind of gave them permission to kind of stand watch over the tomb. And of course, what happens to them when the earthquake and the angel appears?
Well, they were afraid and ran to the leaders of the church.
Well, but hang on, let's stick within the confines of this particular passage. So at first, though, what happens to them?
Okay. They shook and became like dead men.
Yeah, they became like dead men. Yeah, just like statues. And what is the mood of these women as they after they encounter the angel and see all these things? The angel says, he's been raised from the dead, and what's their reaction?
They're afraid and they're excited and they're joyful all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and looking at these stories together, that's one of the things that I was noticing, that, I mean, you will really see it in Mark's gospel and the way that ends. But it's not, Mark's not alone in kind of expressing that. What do you think the fear is? And or the joy, I suppose, for that matter.
Well, I'd sure be afraid if I was there. It's all pretty weird.
Okay. Yeah.
Strange events, angels and Jesus reappearing, and his body's not there. It's all kind of wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if you were a woman confronting the centurions, you would have been in a position of not having very much empowerment. It would be scary already, even if the tomb wasn't empty.
Mm-hmm.
Seems kind of interesting that the women and the disciples are all not expecting this, whereas the guards and Pilate are afraid that, I mean, they know that they say he'll be risen, and so they don't want them to, it said in the previous chapter, they don't want them to claim that he's risen.
Mm-hmm.
But yet everybody's totally shocked and surprised to find the tomb empty.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if they could, we give them a little bit of slack, that maybe some of what they heard from Jesus, I wonder if they thought he was speaking kind of figuratively, as he did, so many times.
Yes.
No doubt.
So, and then of course, in the story, Jesus appears to them. And what happens in that exchange? Remember, they're racing back to go to everybody else.
Well, they fell at his feet and worshiped him. So they obviously recognized him when he appeared to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then gave him instructions to go tell his brothers, he called them in my Bible, to go to Galilee.
Yeah.
Meet him there.
And they clung to him.
Yeah.
his
I think it's intriguing that the guards actually see the angel. This isn't one of those instances where it's just sort of the believers see it. The angels are seen by the guards and make them quake too.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go ahead and read the guards report, and then we'll come back and circle back to Mark. But before we do that, I do want to point this out. I think it was Rosalie, you just said that, tell my brothers to go to Galilee. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about the women here right now. Matsons, I'm just wondering if you guys have queso with those chips, or is it just straight chips? Yeah. I saw Juanita's.
I'm thinking
there you go.
it's going to pass from one window to the next.
Yeah. The queso is, if it's the queso I'm thinking that's just really good. Man, cannot get enough of that. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about women for a minute here, because Rosalie was saying that, yeah, in her translation it says, "Go tell my brothers," and I that's what my translation says too. It's the NRSV. But I was also reading it on my phone earlier, which is the updated NRSV. So the NRSV is more sort of academic and kind of literal in some ways, some of the translations. So it maybe is not the most readable on some levels. It does, in the NRSV, it does include some things that are a little more maybe inclusive, if you will. So in the language, it might say, my brothers or something. And well, it's kind of patriarchal society. And so, just like somebody might say mankind, they don't just mean men, they mean humankind. And so anyway, brothers, they'll translate that as brothers and sisters, like Paul's writing to, church in Galatia and saying, brothers, it'll say brothers and sisters with a little footnote saying in the Greek, it just says brothers, but we kind of get
We're not
that.
calling them yet, though.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But so what I wanted to add, though, is that in the updated version of the NRSV, it is even a little more inclusive about some of the language about, God and so on. They've kind of gone through and tweaked some of those things. And I noticed that in this passage, it says, "Go tell my brothers and sisters this." And I just wanted to say that I just sort of glanced over it, and then later I was like, wait a minute, what did that say? And it just really caught me, that I think women have an extra challenge maybe in reading the scriptures because it's patriarchal and things. And so we don't hear a lot of stories about amazing women that are in the Bible, except for little snippets here and there. But if you really look for that and see it, it's like, wow, they were pretty powerful, influential, and just don't really get the credit. So hang on. So when I saw that, it just really touched my heart, and I just wanted to kind of call attention.
Translating it as brothers and sisters instead of siblings has a warmer feeling to it.
Yeah,
a closer, more personal.
yeah.
Yeah, I felt it was more personal than saying my disciples.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's when it said brothers and sisters, I was like, wow, it's like, because who were the people that are there, right? There are some of the women. And we know that there were more women than just the ones that showed up, at the tomb in any of the stories, right?
Well,
the stories have all the same women.
In Matthew, that Jesus' heritage, there's several women mentioned there, down through time, and I think he's the only one that does that.
I think Luke refers to others as a plural for the women that were there, other than he already lists more women by name.
And others, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's would somebody read the guards report for us? So we're skipping down to Matthew 28, 11 through 15.
Okay, I will. While the women went on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, the disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep." In this report gets to the great, excuse me, I'm having trouble reading tonight. This report gets to the governor. We will satisfy, if this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day.
So the irony is, I noted that it's these guards really that help share the good news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently they were even though they were frozen, they were able to take in what had happened around them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they were afraid that they were really in trouble because they were supposed to be awake watching. And if the governor thought that they'd been asleep, he could have chopped off their head.
That's true.
Well, think about anybody with that experience. So we were talking about how the women had fear and joy, this mix of that. And and I asked, well, why were they afraid? Well, I mean, we can see the same thing with the guards. I mean, who's going to believe this? And the guards have a lot at stake, whether it's the real story or a falsified story. I mean, this is bad if they were asleep on the post, right?
I remember the story when Paul and Silas are in jail and the earthquake knocks the doors open on the jail. The jailer was terrified. He was ready to take his own life.
Yeah. I just have to point this out in my notes in my study Bible. It says for this passage, the empire strikes back, comma, with a different spin on events. But I like the Empire Strikes Back, little Star Wars reference, I think there. And there's a footnote that to chapter 27, verse 24, where they said that if Jesus came down from the cross, they would believe. So even when given the events from their own soldiers, having had that recounted to them from their own soldiers, they don't believe. So, or maybe they do believe and they just fear, and so that's why they want to cover it up. I mean, maybe not believe in the same sense of faith, perhaps, but like, oh my gosh, this really did happen. So
I couldn't help but think back to Judas accepting the money for betraying Jesus, And here they were accepting money for trying to destroy the concept of the resurrection.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to share about this one? So going back, what convinced the followers of Jesus that he was alive? In the first one we read was what?
He appeared.
Here.
He appeared to them, right? And what would you say about the guards? Even though they're not followers of Jesus, but what makes them believe? What would you say?
They couldn't come up with any other explanation for why he wasn't there.
Uh-huh.
They knew no one had taken him.
Yeah, although I guess they didn't experience Jesus, but they saw the empty tomb. Well, we'll see that in other passages too. You know, people that see the empty tomb, and that leads them to believe.
They apparently see this dazzling angel.
Yeah.
It's just like nothing. It's some unreal phenomenon that they are seeing, not familiar to their experience.
Yeah. All right, you want to take a look at Mark's story. Mark, what do you let's read that one first. You volunteer to read Mark 16, 1-8.
When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You're looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid.
Okay. What do you have in your notes here?
There's a difference that they said nothing to anyone.
Yeah.
So how are the disciples going to find out?
Yeah. What are some of why does Mark appear to end it that way? What happens later is like, these other additional endings of Mark, but for all intents and purposes, it seems that Mark intended to end the gospel where we read it. And then people have had problems with that ever since, hence the other endings. Why would Mark end it that way?
I have no idea.
No idea.
From a
Got to the bottom of the scroll.
but from a literary perspective, why would you do that? Like, if you're a storyteller, why would you end it that way?
Well, it does leave us with a mystery of how then the word got spread, because it says nothing about the guards either. So it leaves us wondering what happens next.
Yeah. Yeah.
It definitely leaves the reader wanting more, which makes it a good ending.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You remember novels that have endings that are closer to this better than other stories, right? I mean, that's just kind of, honestly, this is good writing. Like if you're looking at it from a literary perspective, you want to end it with something like that that's ambiguous, because it means your reader's going to think about it, and it's going to bother the reader, which means they keep thinking about it.
Yeah, and how obvious is it in all these different stories, that we've seen? How obvious is it that what they should believe and think and all that and respond to the empty tomb? I mean, is it like right? I mean, in other words, what I'm saying is that the responses are sort of across the board.
Mhm.
And so ending the story this way, it kind of makes you think a little bit about, yeah, what what would I have thought? How would I have reacted? And again, who the questions, who do we seek? And what does the resurrection mean to us? Mark, I think, really invites us into those questions with this ending. Here's a note from my study Bible. I'll share. Unlike some other characters in the narrative who are commanded to be silent but speak out, the women are commanded to speak but remain silent. Their reason is fear, similar to the silence of many earlier characters, especially the disciples. And there's a note back to chapter 4 here, but the ending is probably rhetorically intended to raise the emotions of listeners, encouraging them to act in faithful ways in order to succeed where the women and disciples did not. However, ending on a further report of failure by Jesus' followers, while consistent with much of the story, has continued to be unsatisfactory to many generations of gospel readers up to the present. But so anyway, yeah, I do think it's a very effective ending. And I mean, the story of the resurrection is told by us. And so I think it does make us think a little bit about how would we tell that story? Any other observations from this passage?
This-
From your notes?
Line 7 says, "Go and tell his disciples and Peter."
Peter.
Mhm.
Why is Peter listed separately from the disciples?
Why do you think Peter's listed separately?
I think it was because he wanted to be sure that Peter knew that he was included because he had denied Jesus the 3 times.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, sure. And then also, Peter was seen as the head of the church, right? Given
Yeah.
the keys to the church and so on. That's kind of would be my guess on it.
So when do you think he became the head of the church?
Well, he preached it in Acts, right, at Pentecost and stuff. I mean, I think Jesus sort of just designated him, apparently.
He's already playing that role on the Pentecost day. He's the key speaker.
Yeah. And, it's through Peter that the message goes out to the Gentiles. We'll see later that whole story. How did they, it says that they said nothing, but what convinced them that he was alive, these women, in Mark's telling?
I guess it was the young man who may have been an angel, who just told them He's on his way to Galilee,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds pretty concrete,
Yeah. Um,
So is the significance of the young man sitting on the right hand that he is to represent Jesus in this?
oh, I don't know.
Why mention that he was on the right hand side?
Right. It is an interesting detail. I don't know what to say about that. Oh, the right side.
Yeah.
Well, there's some notes. Anybody have a comment on that? Could look some of them up. But I think what led them to believe is that when he says, all these things, tell the disciples he's going ahead of you to Galilee, there we will see him, just as he told you. So there's a sense of like a fulfillment of what he had told you, because I do think that they left believing, even though they didn't say anything. I mean, because the sense that they were amazed and so on. But let's see, Mark 10:37 is a note about something about the right side. Let's see here. Yeah, grant us one to sit at your right hand, one to sit at your left. I don't, yeah. 12:36. I'll look up one more and see what it says. Yeah, David himself, by the Holy Spirit, declared, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand." Yeah, not sure. I think it means something, probably. I don't know. I just don't know what it is, because that is an interesting detail. And I think Mark is so short on his words that whatever he puts in there, you're like, I wonder what he's saying here. How many of you like the ending of Mark's gospel? Paul, okay, or can at least appreciate it now, maybe.
Oh, I can appreciate it, I guess I'd say now. Once you and Paul explained the leaving it open end.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think I have to go back and look at my notes. I think I've preached on it maybe only once or twice on Easter, but it is very provocative. I wouldn't want that to be my main course for Easter, if you know what I mean. But it is very effective too. All right, somebody read for us. Somebody hasn't maybe read yet. Luke 24, 1-12, the resurrection story again.
On the first day am I on? Let's see.
Yep.
On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee? The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. So it makes me wonder how close the tomb was to where they were.
Hmm. Well, the tomb would have been not far from the crucifixion site, just outside the city walls, outside the city. And if they were in the city, might not have been particularly far. I mean, the old city of Jerusalem and everything. So, but there's Peter again, right?
Yeah.
And so what is it here that gets them believing that Jesus is raised from the dead?
Let's see.
I think it's verse 8. Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and all the rest. Again, to the 11, the men, right, and all the rest. Well, other disciples, and probably a number of women too. Yeah, what's that, John?
I was going to say we see finally there are two of the Gospels where Jesus appears to. I'm not sure whether it's just the women or to the women and disciples, but Jesus makes a personal appearance rather than just the word that he's been risen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not one of them.
Well, later he does, and right. Not in this, not Easter morning perhaps, but Easter afternoon.
Oh, they eventually will see him.
Yeah, well, he'll appear to Cleopas and his friend.
And he appears wherever they're staying, in the upper room or something like that. But I think it was Matthew and John have him actually in this set of words that we're reading appear to the women, I believe it is.
So they are the first sort of apostles here, if you will, messengers of the good news, and they go back and they tell the men, and what happens?
Didn't believe him.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Kind of a fantastic thing to believe, really. They didn't see it.
It
Yeah, it just
kinda
makes me
makes me-
laugh. I think people. It seems that there's some people that think they can share the story of the resurrection, and that's hands down, now you have to believe because I just read it to you, and just to see the confusion and fear and joy, amazement, all these things across the board, again telling us that there's really, it's not so simple how we respond to the resurrection.
Seems in a way like this, it could almost give a hint, at least, to why Mark ended with having them say nothing, rather than dispute the women.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be hard to believe.
Yeah.
And Jesus is predicting his death.
Yeah.
They don't want to listen carefully to it. They are not taking that as a serious projection of what's going to happen, and they are still very, tuned out. They're not seeing this as what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Some angel has to tell them.
Do you think the two men that had gleamed like lightning could be thought of as angels?
I think so.
They're not called angels here, but it seems like that's what they're representing
Right.
You know, is that Luke?
in Luke, yeah.
And what is it that they say to the women? Oh, why do you look for the living among the dead?
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I was going to say is sort of a telltale sign that they're having a divine encounter that's actually missing here. But I still think, the dazzling clothes, yours said lightning, right?
Mhm.
I think that would point to, like a theophany here or something, that they are seeing these angels. But usually, when they'll say, "Do not be afraid," or Jesus says that, "Do not be afraid." But I would vote for angels. Yeah.
But some of that be descriptive, because there are other places where angels appear that are very different in appearance. And so maybe like the angels in this way appeared as a human-ish, right?
Wow.
As opposed to something else crazy looking. So maybe they were just trying to explain the visual piece of it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it just gets back into, how do you describe, something that's amazing like that? Something that really honestly feels kind of dreamlike. And you know how that is. How do you describe a dream?
Yeah, Luke is also writing to Gentiles, and he is a Gentile.
Mhm.
And so his take on it comes more from not having all this previous history of all the angels that appeared in the Old Testament. And he's telling it to people that that's a new story.
Hmm. Well, let's take a look, John. John 20, 1 through 18, a little longer. Hey, what, since this is the gospel lesson for this Sunday, let me practice on you here and I'll read it. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. A lot of new facets to the story in this one.
How do you pronounce that word again? Rabuni? It's not like
Rabboni, Rabbi, Rabu.
that. Yeah, because I mean, I've never figured out how to pronounce that correctly.
Yeah,
Like I just Rabboni, and I'm like, I don't know if that's right.
Rabboni.
Yeah, no idea if I'm right or wrong on that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. You know, the key is you just say it like, you know, you just say it with gusto and
Rabouni.
Rabouni, yeah.
Am I pronouncing the U separately from the O sound? I don't know.
Let me see here.
Like Rabboni rhymes with Zamboni. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but I'm on my Bible program. It has a pronunciation thing. Let me see what they say.
Rabiuni.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Rabuni.
Rabbiuni. I'll play it again.
Like, so we're all wrong.
Yeah.
Basically.
Rabiuni.
Rabbiuni.
Rabuni.
Yeah.
So the word's much prettier in reality than I thought it was, because I was going with like a Zamboni rhyming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rabboni.
Rabboni. Like
Rabboni. Rabboni.
pasta.
Rabboni. So yeah.
So one of the things that sticks out to me, besides Rabridabuni or whatever the word is, the thing that is interesting to me is he's talking with her. She's so caught up in her emotions. I mean, she's obviously really upset that someone has taken his body, but it takes Jesus saying her name to kind of jar her out of it. And I kind of wonder, like, I try to imagine what the tone would have been like. And I'm not sure if it was sort of a kind of like an exasperated, like, Mary,
Yeah.
like, hello, it's me. I mean, I don't know. I think that that's kind of an interesting moment, that's the way that he was able to capture her attention and get her to realize who she was talking to.
Yeah, I've always read it more sort of compassionately or something. Mary, you know. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting take on it, though. Mary, hey,
like Mary, because
I think it brings up the question of what our resurrected body will look like. Will we look like we're 20 or 80 or somewhere in between? And I think that is part of what is confusing to these people, is Jesus does not look exactly the way he used to.
Well, I think he does. He's got the holes and everything.
Yeah.
In his case.
I thought it was interesting that at first he just called her woman, you know. I mean, you know, she's a good friend and everything. So why didn't you just say Mary to begin with? But he says woman.
All the disciples are confused. They want to see the wounds and make sure that it's really Jesus.
Yeah. That's why I think there is a little bit of humor in some of these encounters, just in the way. Because I mean,
the foot race between John and Peter is definitely one of the more humorous things.
Yeah, and when you look at his teaching style throughout the Gospels, he has a sense of humor about like the metaphors and things like that he uses. And I think that there was like a little room for reading some levity into the mechanics of this for sure.
I might go that way on Sunday. I like that. Because like if you're playing with somebody, you would be like, woman, who are you, you know, right? Who are you looking? What are you doing? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, if I had been raised from the dead, I don't know if I would be able to help myself. Like I would absolutely.
Yeah, imagine John at age 80, remembering back some of these things, and it's like telling what you did in high school.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, you could have a lot of fun coming back from the dead. Don't you think?
Oh, I'm totally getting a sheet and I'm cutting eye holes out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay, so
vote-
I have
I
a
vote-
question.
Oh, go ahead, Vicky.
Well, there's something that sticks out to me, and he's saying, "Don't hold on to me because I have not yet ascended." So,
Yeah.
in the Jewish tradition, was it that your soul hangs around for a while?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that right, Paul? Go ahead.
I think so. Well, I know that there are some beliefs about what happened to the soul. Like, I'm not real sure if a Dybbuk, for instance, is supposed to be a demon or the spirit of a person who became evil and just kind of continues to haunt other people. I bet that, yeah, there may be something about that. I don't know. I'd have to take a closer look at the history of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of detail. One thing that the study Bible notes here is Mary recognizes Jesus because he calls her by name, and it kind of brings back to mind the idea that he's the good shepherd, and he calls the sheep by name. They know him, and yeah, whether he's trying to play a joke on Mary or not, I think that it's a very affectionate, personal greeting.
I think it's interesting that they all play out differently, because John goes, sees the linens, and just stops. And then Peter immediately rushes in. And then John takes his time and then goes in. And Mary just waits until she's approached. And so I think it paints a wide variety of, when you kind of say this, the question, how would you have reacted? It paints a wide range of ways that people got to that understanding.
Yeah, I agree.
When Mary looks in the tomb, she bends over to look in the tomb, which gives you a little different concept of the size of this tomb and its entrance.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is more consistent with the archaeology that we hear about, that it's not a high ceilinged room, it's a cave that's been dug out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe cave isn't even the right word. It's been excavated, and you don't dig any more than you have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, you're not living in there, or nobody's living in there, right? They're just there, for a little bit. Or here, I'm gonna.
Not standing up in there a lot.
Oh, yeah, they're not. Yeah, you don't have a kitchen in your tomb and things like that. Let me see here.
I did find something on the soul after death.
Go ahead.
There was a belief that, depending on what group you were in, that the soul would linger for 3 days after death. Close to them.
Well, this being the third day, here's a tomb that around the same time as Jesus, basically. So first century tomb. It's hard to get kind of the scale, but it is a, well, maybe you can, but you have to bend down to it to get in. I'd say the entry is maybe 3.5 feet tall or something like that. And that is actually at a site that kind of near where some believe the Holy Family lived. This is in Nazareth. So who knows? Potentially a tomb where Joseph could have been buried or something. But you see if you can see that back in the back there, a place where a body would have been kept and so on. So there's an actual tomb. Yeah.
So quick question, and kind of, I know this is totally going back to a different passage, but when we talked about the earthquakes, are there fault lines there? Like, is that a normal thing? Or would the earthquake that tore the curtain and the earthquake that rolled the stone away been like totally unexpected things that they wouldn't have thought to happen?
I think there is a fault line in that.
Yeah, Ardith?
Yeah, I looked it up once and there was, but I forget what it was associated with. exactly.
Because they have had different things have been destroyed by earthquakes over the millennia, I think. So cool. And Ardith, that kind of stone, a lot of the stone there is fairly soft, I think, as far as digging out. I know there's a lot of little caves and things like that there.
Limestone maybe, or sandstone.
Yeah, I wonder.
It's white rock, so it looks like that.
All right. Now let's skip down to okay, so far from these stories, anybody want to weigh in on their favorite, or at least their favorite this year? How many want to go with the Matthew story with the earthquake and the guards? Not so much. Mark's ending, Mark and his they left with fear, and like in that one. And Luke with the women telling the story. Okay. And then Mark or John's gospel with Mary Magdalene. Mary, yeah, okay. And then maybe the next one too, the walk to Emmaus is another part of it. How about that one? So kind of Mark and or rather Luke and John a little bit here. Sounds like okay. What's happening in the walk to Emmaus? And again, is Jesus having fun here? Why is he doing this, and what's the effect of Jesus kind of incognito?
I think if he revealed himself immediately, the whole relationship would have been different. And by giving them the time to talk about it, to talk with him, brought him to a point of understanding, not being shocked, but understanding.
Kind of like in a classroom setting where you have a teacher that guides you through questions or some type of prompting to get to an answer, as opposed to just putting a bunch of facts up on the board and making you memorize them.
Yeah, pedagogically, this is really effective, isn't it? Tell me what happened. And they go through and, they talk about, they recount everything to him.
Yeah.
And furthermore, this is the third day. And then Jesus kind of fills in some of the gaps, doesn't he? Doesn't it say that the Son of Man, should be handed over and these kinds of things? And
well, two things that I'm thinking. Two things. One is it's kind of in keeping with his character all along, of the way he interacts with people. And then also, if I were to come back from the dead and be around people that I had known before, I would be wondering, okay, what was my impact? What are they thinking? Is any of this lasting with them? And what's going on here? So
I really like the story of the road Emmaus, that Jesus makes a point of coming to these two disciples explaining all the things that they hadn't understood or couldn't remember, and then breaking bread with them, and they recognize him in the act of this communion experience.
Mhm.
And it's something I can identify as, I could have been one of the characters in Walking, trying to understand much better than I could have been one of the disciples going and seeing the clue of the empty tomb.
Hmm. So Vicky, would you come back and sit down with your friends and like, oh, tell me about this Vicky person that you're
Yeah, it'd be kind of tempting.
uh-huh. Um, yeah. Well, it's certainly an evocative story. It does make me wonder, did Jesus know their unbelief ahead of time, right? Did he have, was he clued in already that the women go back and they tell the story to the men and they don't believe? Does he know that? And so he's kind of seeking them out and have a little fun. And of course, by the time they get back, they find out that Jesus had appeared to Peter and some others, right?
Now, if we're thinking as literature, if this had not been in the Bible, this bit of the story, then we wouldn't have kind of this summary and what else is it? You know what I'm saying? Like if this was just missing from the Bible, how would it come across differently, the whole story?
Mhm.
What do you think? Well, I think it's really, I think it's a really effective story, and we'll see a story that seems similar to me in the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts, right? That trying to figure out, who is this Jesus and so on. Seems kind of similar in a way.
Yeah. The road to Emmaus is only in Luke, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little more part of Luke's storytelling style too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's true.
He just keeps popping in and out. It was like he's there for the meal, then all of a sudden he vanishes, and then a few minutes later they're running to talk to somebody about it, and he just like pops his head in. I don't know. I've never really thought about it in a humorous way, but maybe he's just kind of like trolling them all the time.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I come back to again and again that I really appreciate is how Jesus is seeking out people.
Mhm.
Again, I think we place a lot of emphasis on people finding Jesus, and stuff. And I think the relentlessness, if you will, of God seeking us, and that's the whole story of the incarnation and everything. But after the resurrection, I really like that. So it's not like it's a test, like, hey, I already told you, you should believe, but it's like, it's sort of like he's slipping the answer key over, showing up, finding ways to connect with them.
Yeah, imagine if we had just been left with, the tomb is empty,
Mhm.
period, the end. Like that would be really different.
Yeah, and the other thing that really strikes me, and it comes out in John's gospel too, is that there's belief without full understanding. I love that. There are in all these different ways, in different stories. I mean, there are different ways that people come to a knowledge of the resurrected Lord. Some people see and they believe. Other people, we're not looking at Thomas's story today, but other people, you know, there something else is kind of needed, and yet, you know, Jesus comes and seeks people out, and yeah, it's kind of cool.
It would have been so much easier, though, if any of these people had remembered that he was supposed to rise on the third day.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been a lot easier. Does anybody? Nobody was expecting that, right?
And at least some of them do recall after the angel or whoever tells them that he
After the
in
fact,
fact had
right.
said that.
And I wonder if part of it might have been, you know, the nature of his death being so gruesome and things,
Mhm.
you know.
Part of it is just a lot of information. I mean, that's the equivalent of us saying Matt preached on something 2 years ago that we should have remembered that one item at that one time.
Right.
It's a lot of, you know, and they even had more because they were living together constantly. So like, you know, it was this sometimes those details.
Yeah, and like John saying, you know, that there aren't enough books in the world to recount all the stories and things.
And they experienced a trauma. And our memory does weird stuff when we go through a trauma.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does.
yeah, that's a really, really good point.
That was one of the things that struck me in the difference in each story. Kind of like a whole lot of people can see something, but who they'll remember was there, what they'll say to people, and they might say something at one time and something at another time as thoughts come through their head. It kind of makes me think of how if the police want to get information from several people on an incident, they ask them separately.
Yeah,
Because if they were all together, oh yeah, they'd all tell the same story.
Yeah.
But this gives us, you know, different perspectives all the time.
yeah. Well, you know, a case in point, last week I witnessed an accident right down the street from me, on, you know, by the Wendy's. And so I stopped, and because I was right behind the car, we were going through a green light. I was right behind the car that got struck. Somebody coming down, going, you know, eastbound on First or westbound on First, and hit the other car, T-bone, or not T-bone, but kind of the elbowed, I guess, you know, kind of at the back end of the car. And anyway, so I was there, and the police came, and you know, I wrote down my, you know, account and everything. And there was somebody else that had stopped, and he wrote down things too. And he had a completely different, you know, he had like a different car and hit, you know, the other car hit the other. I mean, his story, the evidence would not support his story, and he meant well. He just, you know, and I don't know. I don't think he was trying to deceive the police or anything like that. That's just what he remembered. And I'm hoping, you know, that my account, you know, well, will line up with the physical evidence and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, get the one person off the hook as far as, you know, who caused it and so on. But yeah, it's just, you know, so it's kind of any wonder, I think, why some of these stories are so different. And I think part of the difference is, you know, that they're coming at it from, like we started, they're coming at it from a perspective of belief. And they're just telling the story. So they're not concerned about, you know, we got to make sure every little detail, you know, lines up and all that kind of stuff. And, you know,
They've got the scene. They have had the opportunity to see more of the story before they've written this part down.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to make it fit.
Yeah. Well, let's see, with our time, we can get back to the last couple of verses here, but I want to skip over to the comparisons here, and just to kind of highlight, and we've been talking around a bunch of these, but again, you know, just some of the differences here. So what do we notice about the people that went to the tomb?
Mary Magdalene definitely went.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing else. Mary Magdalene went for sure. Right.
And it was sometime early in the morning.
Yeah, maybe before dawn or right, pretty early. Kind of shows some devotion there, certainly. We know that Peter, I didn't list Peter actually as one because I was thinking more of who originally, the first people that went, but Peter seems to factor in what, 2 or 3 of the stories, maybe?
Luke and John.
Luke and John,
Just Luke and John. Okay.
and then John's in John.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, the women, to give a lot of credit here, I think. What about any other things about the who went? They want to highlight? What did they see? How
An
many of them
open-
had angels or?
Open tomb and the angels.
Uh-huh.
But the number of angels and people they saw changed.
Yeah.
There was somebody there in each account.
Yep. Each one, right. There was somebody there. Yeah. We were talking about this a little bit in Bible study on Tuesday. I'm starting to think more and more that Jesus might have needed somebody to unwrap the cloths and stuff like that, depending on how he was wrapped up. And it just makes me think of the angels attending Jesus after the at the end of the 40 days in the wilderness, after he's been tempted by the devil.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if angels came and unbound him. I don't know. I don't know if that's sacrilegious to think that, but it's like, it seems practical.
Well, and even the story of Lazarus, somebody had to unwrap him.
Yeah. Of course, Jesus can walk through, I guess the other way you can look at those, if he can walk through walls and appear suddenly, then maybe he can magically just pop all the grave cloths off or something too.
I'm thinking a humorous thought about unwrapping Jesus as being our Christmas story.
Yeah. Yeah. So for Easter, you could have like a little, like a little Jesus that you could unwrap, but then when you unwrapped it, there would be nothing there.
Oh,
Don't you, right?
It's not going to catch on, I don't think.
Paul's working on it now. I can see the wheels turning there.
With all the Jesus action figures.
right.
Yeah.
No, I think we got to come up with somebody like Josephus that drew a picture of how they wrapped corpses.
Right. Any other what did they see? What were they told to do? Kind of different in the different
Go tell people.
Okay, did they all do that?
Not according to John.
No, Peter
Well-
and John show up and on their own, I guess. Mary Magdalene wasn't told to tell them.
I guess it was Luke where they were. Didn't tell.
I noticed in Luke, I'm pretty sure that in Luke that they're not told.
Right.
They're not told, they're just told to remember his words.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not necessarily specifically told to go tell the other disciples. Thought that was kind of interesting. But the women did. I mean, they still did that, but that was interesting. John's gospel, yeah, they're told, do not hold on to me, go tell the others I'm ascending to God. Yeah, tell the disciples, back to the Matthew, tell the brothers and sisters, right? That brothers point. brothers and sisters, he has been raised. Meet him in Galilee. Who did they tell, or whom did they tell?
The disciples and Peter.
And no one.
And no one.
Mhm.
Yeah, and even Matthew, if you look at it technically in the 1 through 10, it's not exactly clear who they told, but they were on their way at least to tell the disciples when Jesus appeared.
Yeah, what they're being told is to go on to Galilee, not to, at least that's the instruction.
Mhm. Yeah. So in the kind of closing time that we have here, there's some reflections on this reading. I mean, this is the resurrection is central to our faith. And you know, I don't know. I feel like every time we pick up some of these stories, we look at them, some new things kind of come out and so on. And the fact that we're studying it in Holy Week and things. Yeah. What are some reflections for you this Holy Week?
The reflection that we read just starting spoke of what was it? Anyway, it was about Jesus' new exodus, and some of the it's an approach that we don't really dwell on in understanding. Jesus does his exodus, which is a word that was used in the Transfiguration. He's doing a new Passover with the Lord's Supper. It's for some people, it's a turning point in not only what we understood about Jesus, but what he was trying to accomplish.
I think what they meant in the beginning about the Exodus is the same way that the Jewish people looked at their history through the lens of that event.
He's the new Moses.
Well, yeah, and so for us, we look at our history, if you will. We look at our faith through the lens of the resurrection.
Mm-hmm. But I'm saying we don't emphasize this replaying of the Exodus story through Jesus' resurrection, and
Yeah.
other people theologically do that.
Oh, okay.
I think if I was on the spot, I would be like the women, kind of afraid, amazed. I think a lot of emotions would go through me.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard this over and over for many years, so it has become more familiar. But if I had not heard it, it would be something more amazing than what I'm hearing about it now. My mind would be blown.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're so used to saying he is risen indeed, that we've put it on automatic pilot almost.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't become new and fresh every Easter.
I mean, if you're a new Christian, then it probably has more meaning. But for us old Christians, it's sort of the same. What we hear, we go through this every year.
Yeah.
I have to admit, though, I was, raised in the church, and Easter morning out to the cemetery north of Seattle and everything with our youth group. But it has so much more meaning to me now than it did in my younger years.
Hmm.
It was kind of like, well, I've been told, I've lived it all the time. But now, having done a lot of scripture study and stuff, it has more meaning. I mean, not just this, but through the years as an adult.
I think it's interesting that number 3 comes up quite a bit. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And then when we read that Jesus, what was it, 3 times after the resurrection, he appeared.
Hmm.
So 3 seems to be a pretty important number.
Hmm.
Well, he told Peter, Peter, 3 times, feed my sheep.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the other one. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
I think the piece that is something that's been a more recent observation for me is just the different ways he reaches out to people, not just during his ministry, but even after his resurrection. Like, he comes to people when they can handle it and when they're ready to see it, and in a way that will make sense to them. Because in some ways, like the walk to Emmaus, like I could totally see that being me. Like, after this happened, grabbing one of my friends and being like, okay, we got to talk through this. What the heck even just happened?
Yeah.
Like, I really can relate to that because I'm a verbal processor, and I wouldn't be the griever. I'd be the like, what are we doing? Like, what is going on? And so he might have to come to me that way to be like, hey, how about you stop trying to figure out what's going on and just see that I'm here. But I think, he didn't belittle anybody, and he didn't, although some of the disciples, maybe there was a little bit of, come on guys, really, how many times do I have to tell you? But he really took the time to connect with people in different ways and in different times.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it can really reflect like our journeys, instead of there being this idea of like, you became a Christian at one time. Like, there had to be this one moment where it happens. For some people that happens, but for some people there's a process. And instead of looking down on the process, sometimes the process can be really meaningful. And I think that needs to be recognized.
I agree with you. I think that God speaks to people in different ways. I don't think there's one way that God speaks to us, or there's no one way for everybody. He speaks in different ways.
Yeah. I just had a reflection this morning about kind of the long story short is that I'm tearing out our shower downstairs, and I wasn't necessarily planning on doing much on that, specifically today. I worked on it some more last night and things, and Michael Rivers had given me an opportunity. He said basically like, hey, I can come over and haul some stuff off for you, if you want to. What I was down to was like tearing out the old fiberglass shower, and to me, not knowing much, I looked at it like, man, this is going to take me forever. And he goes, you shouldn't take you very long, because I have a electric saw that'll cut through that. He said, you shouldn't take you very long. And so he kind of gave me the confidence to start, demolishing it, and it didn't take very long. And I guess what struck me was sort of like in the process of tearing all that out, what seemed pretty solid to me, like, man, it just kind of crumbled pretty quick. And in the same way, like, I think we look at our lives and our world and what's possible and things like that. And like the resurrection is sort of like the sawzall that just like makes short work of this thing. and just is a total, this paradigm shifting event. And so just the power of the resurrection, and that we still don't really fully understand it, because everything else looks so solid to us, and Jesus like, no. All right, well, good stuff. Next week, we're going to move on to looking at the Holy Spirit, and move on to the Book of Acts. There's certainly more we could have spent with the resurrection and some of the post-resurrection stories, but hey, it's Easter, and we're going to the Easter season here, so have a chance to do that. Put a plug in, by the way, if you can make it to Monday, Thursday service tomorrow, and Good Friday service, both of them at 7:30. That'd be great. And let's close in prayer. Lord, thank you that we have this opportunity tonight to explore the resurrection, and what a great way to prepare ourselves for Sunday. So we seek your blessing for us as we continue these reflections, and find new meaning for these events. And in the process, I pray that we will continue to hear you speaking to us, and guiding us, that we would go forth and share the good news. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor Matt.
Yeah.